could mean you could be a politician. We always say good for you. Nice to see you.
Now we do have a special guest today, in fact the local federal member of Parliament who needs no introduction. Please give a warm welcome to Kevin Rudd. Well, g'day. The welcome to our community on Brisbane South Side. Those of you from the north side, you can get your visas sorted out over there. And we're very particular about that in our part of Brisbane. Sometimes Queensland politics gets a little weird. And it's pretty weird right now. Because I see in the paper this morning that we've got Clive Palmer, the new face of progressive politics in Queensland, now saying that we need to bring back the Bjelke-Petersen dynasty. Now, think about it, folks, if you've been around for a bit. We've now got Joe's old press secretary saying that the Bjelke-Petersen dynasty is now necessary to put a stop to this far right-wing Liberal National Party government. Things have been turned on their head and it gets weirder and weirder as each day goes by. Look, I've been in Canberra last week and most of us down there were scratching our head about what was actually happening up here. This looked like the American Civil War in slow motion here in George Street and within the Liberal and National Party. Of course, it would all just look like a three-ring circus. It would all just look like comedy if at the same time it wasn't, in fact, an unfolding tragedy for the communities which make up our state, the great state of Queensland. Let me tell you the story, just two or three little stories about this community and what happens on the ground in a very real sense when things are done badly in George Street. I've heard the Liberal National Party say that they're not going to touch frontline services. Well, yesterday I was in Oxford Street in Bulimba, a mobile office. And the Liberal National Party are up the road doing their thing. And this lady comes up to me and says, "No frontline services cut, eh?" And she said, I was a contract employee with Children's Services. My job was as a Children's Protection Officer. They cut my job and did not replace it with anybody else. If you don't think that is a cut to frontline services to the most vulnerable kids in our state, I don't know what is. This morning I was up the road at the Langlands Park swimming pool. There's a fundraiser on there for motor neurone disease. A terrific local bloke here on the south side who's got this dreadful disease and is raising hundreds of thousands of bucks to try and defeat it. I run into a firey from the Queensland Fire Service. Comes up to me and said, "Not cutting frontline services, eh?" And what he said to me was his story. That right across Brisbane now, guess how many mechanics they've got to service the fire trucks? 7. Nope, not 7, not 6, not 5, we're down to 4 for all of Metro Brisbane. Now I thought the definition of a frontline service for the fire service was one of those red trucks screaming up the road to actually attend to fire when it's happening. How can you do that if you've got no basic mechanical services in-house to look after your trucks? That is a cut to a frontline service. He also tells me, by the way, and this I think is a particular tribute to Campbell Newman's high levels of, shall I say, common sense. He says now that all of the maintenance services for Queensland fire stations have been outsourced. If you want a light bulb changed at your local fire station, guess what has to happen? the fireys, this is the professional fire service officers, have to ring up. After that, head office has to send someone out from a private company to come and change the light bulb. Each time they do it, one of the fire service officers has to be present in order to supervise the changing of the light bulb. And on top of that, they've got to be inducted each time they come. I don't know about you folks, but when it comes to children's services, to fire services, to home and community care services, what we're seeing right across this community, my community, here on Brisbane's south side, is one frontline service being cut after another. And this morning, I hear again that home and community care services, previously based out of the PA Hospital, are about to be privatised, lock, stock and barrel. What happens to the poor punters, the poor folk who live on the ground, who expect their fire trucks to work, who expect that when someone is laying into a kid, that kid is going to have protection, proper protection at that time through a properly staffed Queensland Children's Protection Service? Or that their home and community care services, which support so many of the oldies in this part of the world, is actually going to work. So when we hear them say, we're not touching frontline services, I see a squadron of pigs flying across the horizon. Pigs might fly. That is simply an absolute lie. Of course, with Campbell Newman, what we have is the entree. With Tony Abbott, we have the main course. Campbell Newman has gone out there and said 14,000 public servants got to go. He didn't say a word about that prior to the election, but 14,000 public servants to go. Tony Abbott is saying, if you can believe it, 20,000 federal public servants to go. Look at the state allocation of that, that's at least another 4,000 to go. The bottom line is this. This is a savage attack on the basic services being delivered to people in communities like this. When you stand back from it all, you've got to ask yourself, what's actually going on here? What's happening? Why are these folk doing it? There's something we need just to think about for a moment. What you see in all of this is not just a triumph of ideology over common sense. It's a triumph of ideology over decency. Basic human decency. There is a viciousness about this which, frankly, I don't think the good people of Queensland can stomach for much longer. There is a basic viciousness to this which doesn't speak well of any of those who have been party to these decisions. So where do we go from here? There are community gatherings like this happening right across our state and right across the communities in Brisbane itself. And we can all just sit back and say, well, the electoral process has happened and we can do nothing about it. I say this, what has happened here in Queensland should stand out as a warning beacon to the entire nation of what happens when the Liberal National Party get political power in their hands. Therefore, it is our challenge, it is our responsibility as the torchbearers of this Labor movement to say to Newman and to say to Abbott, no, no and no. We, the working people of this state, we, the people who stand up for the working people of this state, we who stand up for organised labour in this state and across the nation, our job is to pick up the banners, to pick up what we have in our hands and to produce the biggest public campaign of resistance against this mob that they've seen in the history of this state since the Shearers founded the Union in 1891, 120 years ago. There's a narrative in this about the future, and it's this. What we in Labor governments do, despite our faults, is this. We build a place up, they tear it down. We build the social fabric, they rip it apart. We plan for the future, they kind of just wallow in the past. And that's what we see unfolding before us here as well. If Abbott's elected, 20,000 jobs to go. If Abbott's elected, they'll rip out Medicare local services from across Queensland and across the country. If Abbott gets elected, you'll see slash and burn in education and training. In this community, you see it as well. And with the National Broadband Network, what's their policy? Once we lay it down, they'll rip it up back out of the ground, because that's not the approach that they believe is right. I say to all of them, there is a fundamental dividing line here between a party, a movement, and a group of people who want to give everyone a decent fair go, build up the social fabric, build up and maintain our key services to the community, and build the Australia for the future. That's what we stand for. We're proud to stand for it. That's what they stand for. Our test will be within 1 year's time in defeating this mob at the upcoming federal election. Winning this election for the Australian Labor government will be hard. I have said repeatedly, this election is entirely winnable for the Australian Labor government and the Australian Labor Party. Our ideas are good, our policies are good. We stand for building up communities, not ripping them apart. Let's get on with the battle and we will win it.
Thanks, Kevin. Now,